Today's topic appears to be Kayak Public Transit and the HART contract. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, thank you. We just wanted to take this opportunity as we talk specifically about the new Kayak contract to just kind of give an overview of public transit options and the things we've been doing and the different ways we've been able to hopefully improve things over the last 4 or 5 years. So I'll just turn the time over to Mr. Morgan.
Yes, thank you. As City Manager Smith mentioned, we'll talk quite a bit more about things other than just the HART Kayak contract, because I think, especially for some of the newer councilors who haven't had as much information about this over the years, I think there's a lot more public transit that goes on that people don't necessarily realize, other than, they see the bus running around town. So first off, I think it's interesting, I was thinking about this as I was putting this presentation together earlier today, and if you ask the question, what is public transit, I think particularly out here in the kind of more rural parts of the state, you'll get differing answers as to what that means. I think a lot of folks, their first thought would be something like a bus. That's transit to people. That's the bus that, runs around town, and you get on it and it goes where it wants to go and takes you along for the ride. So that's, one version of public transit. Also, though, we have our Hermiston taxi company. That's one that takes people around. You call it, and you tell it where to go, and it takes you where you want to go. But then we've even now we also have Good Shepherd. They have what would be considered to be public transit. They're providing transit for the public to go to their medical appointments and things internal to the Good Shepherd healthcare system. And even nowadays, Bird Scooter, technically, that can count as a version of public transit anymore. It's open and available to the public for getting around town. So really, there's a lot more different types of things that would otherwise qualify as public transit, other than just, a fixed route bus that I think a lot of people think of when they think about what public transit is. So really what that's getting to is we're getting a lot of different fragmentation of what it means to be public transit. I came across this earlier today. This is a guy standing at the shoe store, and they apparently some shoe manufacturer decided to come up with a one-size-fits-all shoe, but there's reasons why you have different types of shoes. A running shoe is different than a hiking boot, which is different than a rock climbing shoe, is different than a bicycling shoe. And so if you try to come up with one that serves every single person, you're going to end up with one that actually is completely useless to anybody, because you've tried to serve all of those completely different types of needs in one type of product or service. So now I'll just kind of go through some of the in detail, some of the different public transit options that we, the city, directly pay for, and then some others that we actually don't even have any financial contribution toward, but they do still help meet some of that public transit need. By far the longest tenured aspect of our public transit system in Hermiston is our relationship with the local taxi company. So clear back in 1962, almost 50 years ago, is when we began contracting with the local taxi company. Back then, Hermiston was a population of only 4,000 people, and we had a version of public transit. Now that is really what you'd consider to be a demand response system, kind of the opposite again of like a fixed route bus. That's something where that taxi is never going to come pick you up ever unless you call it and ask it to come pick you up and tell you where it's going to go. It's not going on a fixed route. It's only going to show up when you call it. So for our senior and disabled taxi program, the eligibility to participate in that program through the city, you have to either be a senior, which we define as being age 60 or over, or have some form of disability at any age, whether you're a senior or not. This program, it provides rides anywhere inside of the city limits. We don't, the taxi goes outside of the city limits, but the subsidized portion for senior and disabled riders, we don't provide those rides outside of the city limits. In this program, there's no limitation on the type of trip. It's purely just a subsidy for somebody who wants to take a taxi for whatever reason. It doesn't really matter to us. As long as you meet the eligibility requirements, you can take it, to go wherever. We've certainly found, though, that by far and away, most of the riders on that program, they're really using them like what you would expect to get to things like doctor's appointments and go grocery shopping and those types of things. I think something that a lot of people don't realize or maybe fail to appreciate is that this is almost a 24/7 type operation. You know, it goes when the taxi company is open and operational and available, so it's available every single day of the year, and it's operational for 18 hours a day at a minimum. So that really helps provide a tremendous service to people in the community, because I think a lot of us recognize that people have drastically different schedules than maybe they used to, and so having the ability to call up a public transit option through the taxi really any time over the course of 18 hours a day is quite a significant service. Again, really the model for this program is it's a subsidized voucher-based system. So clients, they'll come to City Hall and they'll purchase a taxi ticket from City Hall. Then they can do whatever they want with that ticket or however many tickets they bought. Most of the time they would end up calling a taxi and say, hey, I need to go wherever they're going. Taxi comes, picks them up, takes them where they're going. Before they hop out, they give them the ticket that they purchased, and everyone leaves happy. At the end of the month, the taxi company takes all of those tickets that they received from the riders, bring it back to the city, and turn all those in for reimbursement instead of collecting cash. So the cost to the rider for one of those tickets, we adjusted that here a couple of years ago. It's now at $2.50 for a one-way trip anywhere inside of the city. So for a round trip, if you're using that system, it'd be about $5 cost to the rider. The cost to the public, and I had to put public in parentheses because there's a couple of different public revenue sources that go into that, is right now it's around $4.25. So it's pushing up around $7 total for the total cost for a one-way trip. And what we've been seeing, and this hasn't been a surprise to anybody, but I've been here almost 9 years, really the main revenue source for that public subsidy is a shrinking grant funding source. And that comes from the special transportation funds shared through the state. And the reason it's declining, nobody has to be a rocket scientist to figure out the fact that it's based entirely on cigarette taxes, and that is a shrinking revenue source. Folks just simply aren't smoking as much as they used to. I think it maybe was a good source of solid funding back in the 60s, but those revenues have been significantly declining over the past several decades. Just as an example, in 1993, this same program that we're operating, we received our 1993 STF grant was for $45,000. That was in 1993 dollars. In 2020, our grant was $18,000. So not only are we receiving about a third of what we were in 1993, after you adjust for inflation, it's more like a sixth of what we were receiving back then. So what that means for the public portion of the subsidy, back in the early 90s, it was the actual local city of Hermiston property taxpayers having to make up the cost differential between what the rider pays, what the STF grant pays, and then what needs to be made up by the city. It was almost a one-third split. The city only covered about $20,000 compared to $45,000 in grant funding. Since then, that's completely flipped the other way as the grant funding has declined. Demand has increased steadily along with our local population, and then obviously costs have gone up too. Things like fuel costs, but also a taxi service is very heavy personnel requirement. You have to have the taxi driver driving people around, and so as those costs go up, there's only one way that they can come out of, is that's passing that cost on to the customer, whether that's the rider or the city who's paying to help subsidize those rides. So it was becoming very evident very quickly when I started working with this program that it was really not going to be a very sustainable source of funding for us. So we started surveying our riders back in 2014, once a year in January. We did that for several years until the data just started coming back the exact same every time. And it became very obvious that about 2/3 of all of the about 20,000 annual one-way trips that we were providing back then, about 2/3 of all of those went to 3 locations. That was Walmart, Lifeways, and Good Shepherd. And so that tells you something pretty significant about what's really a cost-efficient model for providing service to some of those locations. but also some of the complaints that we heard at the time. And this was back, we had a different taxi vendor back then than we do now. We've changed taxi providers since then. But at the time, we really were getting a lot of complaints about long wait times, particularly during peak times. If everybody's calling and they all want to go to Walmart at noon, the taxi can only accommodate so many trips of people all going to the exact same place at the exact same time. So that was causing some issues. And I'll always remember we had one of our riders come and actually comment during a city council meeting when we were talking about taxi issues here several years ago, but he said, I don't dare buy ice cream when I'm using the taxi because it'll be melted by the time that I get home. And, that's just simply not a good level of service that we were providing at the time. So there's a number of benefits, a number of drawbacks associated with providing, this type of service through this model. And some of them may not necessarily be otherwise transit related themselves, or maybe it might not be overly obvious to folks. But there's definitely a public benefit associated with having just a general taxi program or a taxi company in town providing service to people that may not be needing the subsidized taxi service. And a lot of that comes in the form of public safety, just making sure that we have a robust and viable taxi company in town to be able to provide taxi service to avoid things like DUIs and those types of things. That's a pretty significant service that is necessary in the community. So working with the local taxi company to contract them to help provide this service really helps provide them with a dedicated funding source that they can really count on through the course of the year. And then also it's a public-private partnership or just contracting with a private vendor. Really, it ends up being the most cost-efficient way of providing a service like this, particularly during low-demand times. So that would be compared to, having the ability to call a taxi at, say, 10:30 at night on a Sunday. Demand's going to look very different than it would at noon on a Wednesday. And so noon on a Wednesday, when everybody's trying to get to Walmart or do those types of things, maybe that's when it does make more sense to have a fixed route bus go provide those services because there's a lot more people going there. Having this more on-demand, on-call type of situation is a lot more cost-efficient, kind of on those shoulder times of the day. The drawbacks of this type of system that we were seeing back in 2014, 2015 timeframe was that during those peak times, you can really experience, system overload when all of a sudden you'll get 5 people all call in over the span of 10 minutes, all wanting to go to Walmart from different parts of town. You're just simply, there's no other way around experiencing some long wait times. But then also one of the drawbacks then is that it's less cost efficient than it's serving the high demand times or high demand locations, kind of the opposite of the benefit on the shoulder times. So looking at all that through 2013 through 2017 timeframe, that's when we really started looking at, what are some of these other potential options for meeting some of those peak demand times of the day. And frankly, I was getting pretty frustrated with some of our regional grant funding partners and agencies. There was very obvious inertia related with obtaining some of that grant funding. At the time, it was a fixed pie of resources that were available for funding a lot of these public transit options. And I think a lot of times folks saw a system expansion from really one of the only communities that's really growing and expanding in Eastern Oregon. A lot of folks saw that as the only place for those dollars to come from was coming out of their allocation of some of these shared resources. So it was really a challenge to get much traction at how we could look at starting something like a fixed route bus in the city. A lot of the feedback that I would get was, there's going to be a grant cycle coming open here in about 1.5 years, so hold off and apply for that, and then you can do a 2-year worth of planning process. And it was going to be like 5 years by the time we actually got something on the ground. And so in January of 2017, City Manager Smith and I met with the representatives from Kayak Public Transit, and they were actually just checking in with us because they had been operating their Hermiston Hopper route that goes from Pendleton into Hermiston and on out to Umatilla. They were just checking in. They hadn't really talked with us much before. They wanted to see how they were doing, see if there's anything else that they could do. And so that's when we kind of jumped on it and said, well, how can we work together to figure out some way to develop a fixed route transit service in the city. And so really just committing at that point to bring some of our own resources at the table to get something up and stand it up, that's really what really sped the process along. So throughout 2017, that's when we, again, working with Kayak, started to develop that first initial contract with them. And one of the biggest things that we needed to figure out was really, what does this route and what does this system really even look like? Because as we can't estimate what the costs are going to be unless we have an idea of how much service we're providing. And in this instance, you know, the amount of time spent driving the bus, that directly relates to the cost for the system. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure out and kind of go back and forth to figure out really what's going to be a cost attainable solution for us, and really what that looks like. So we formed the Public Transit Advisory Committee. Several of the existing counselors were on that group, along with some folks from the Chamber of Commerce and some other folks that are users and riders of the senior and disabled taxi system. And so we really just workshopped this process all through 2017. And this is probably a good shot of exactly what some of our Public Transit Advisory Committee meetings looked like when we were trying to decide how we were going to provide this service. Unfortunately, I think a lot of us didn't really know what it was that we were getting into, and so I think a lot of the feedback, particularly from the committee members, was wanting to be all things to all people, and wanting to you know, run a bus here, there, and everywhere anytime there might potentially be a need. And so that kind of gets back to the first cartoon that I showed. Was I think we were initially starting to build out a system that really didn't end up being very usable to anybody, because it was trying to be usable to everybody. And so it ended up leading to some really long system routes. You know, it took an hour and 15 minutes just to get around town. So that's kind of how we started working our way towards refining a much better route. So in June of 2017, that's when we formed our first 2-year contract with Kayak, and that's when the city of Hermiston committed to providing $150,000 a year towards that program. We went back and forth with Kayak in several iterations before we really figured out what might be the best way of going about it. One of the questions was, should the city be the ones that is applying for some of this outside grant funding to leverage our $150,000 contribution, or should we just be providing those funds to Kayak and have Kayak be the ones, you know, they're the experts, that they deal with a lot of these grant funds on a daily basis. Maybe they should be the ones that are just taking our local contribution and kind of matching that together with some of their other grant funding opportunities. And that's ultimately where we ended up going, was that the city just simply pays a lump sum to Kayak every single year, and then they take that and leverage that against additional grant funding opportunities that are out there. And then also Kayak, you know, it's a complete turnkey operation by going with them, rather than the city going and having to buy a bunch of buses and hire a bunch of bus drivers and find out how we're going to, you know, maintain these buses, who's going to change the oil, all those, where are you going to park these things. So it really has been a turnkey operation that we hire Kayak, and they handle all of the operations, maintenance, management, grant funding, grant administration, all of those things. So in fall of 2017, that's when we finalized our initial HART route. And then in January of 2018 is when we began operations for that system. And we operated that system in the route configuration that we had originally developed into summer of 2018. And we really realized pretty early on in that process that we could really optimize the routing if we eliminated one of those major stops that really wasn't serving anybody. I think at the time it made some sense to have a bus stop out at Riverfront Park. I think folks thought that, you know, we should be stopping at parks, getting people the ability to get to some of those parks. But really nobody was using it. If they're going to Riverfront Park, they're mainly going there to walk anyway. You know, just nobody was using it. And particularly the amount of time that we had available to run those buses at the time, I think we were running just from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so nobody's going to go walk when it's 110 degrees in the middle of the day and take the bus out there. So by eliminating that stop and a couple of others that were really experiencing pretty low utilization, we were able to cut about 15 minutes off of the route time to get us down to just a 1 hour circuit for each circuit, and that was able to increase us to 5 circuits per day. We continued to monitor all of the routing and all of the utilization through 2018. Then in the fall quarter of 2018, that's when we implemented an alternating circuit system. So initially, the bus would just start going in one direction and just go clockwise all day long and just stop at those same routes. But really what we were able to get to by adding multiple additional routes or circuits per day, that's where now the bus will start going in one direction, it'll wait for about 15-20 minutes, then it'll turn around and run the exact same route, just in the opposite direction. And so that really makes it a lot more optimal for people to use the bus to get to and from places without having to wait 4 hours or so for the bus to come back all the way around. And really in the where you're just going in one direction, it really minimizes the market that you're able to serve, because you may have a situation where if the bus is always going in one direction, it really is never going to make sense for the person that wants to go basically the opposite direction. Otherwise they'd have to ride the bus for 45 minutes maybe to get just a quarter of the way across town. So in spring of 2019, that's when we really did our pretty major hour expansion based on the costs that we were seeing for operating the system relative to how much we were contributing to the program. We felt like we could expand those hours. Working with the Public Transit Advisory Committee, we knew that we were experiencing some cost savings, but by adding hours, that's going to eat into that cost savings. So there was quite a good amount of discussion on where do we add those hours. Do we add them by expanding hours during the week, just Monday through Friday, or do we leave the hours the same during the week and add maybe like a 10-hour-a-day Saturday service or something like that? And so ultimately, that's when the decision was made to really just consolidate it all into Monday through Friday and make it a 12-hour per day service. So now I'm happy to report I feel like we have a pretty optimized route currently. So right now we're up to 10 circuits per day. They go in alternating fashion. I'm sure none of you can actually see this, but there's basically arrows that show you here's all the stops right here. This is the direction that the bus is going. It gets to the end, turns around, and goes back the other direction. And so that's kind of how the alternating aspect works. Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, and it actually has 3 connections per day to the Hermiston hopper that goes between Hermiston and Pendleton and on out to Umatilla. So there's 3 times per day that you can actually catch the bus to get out to Umatilla, or take it in the opposite direction when it's coming back to go to Pendleton. And also, I'm sure that if you've never seen a bus schedule like this, it looks like Greek. It took me a long time to figure out how to understand something like that. One thing that we really try to push out on our social media every so often and remind people about is that your cell phone can read that 10 times better and 10 times faster than you may otherwise be able to do just by punching the address that you want to go into your smartphone. Google now is able to cull all of these schedules from Kayak instantaneously. And so if you punch in, I'm at the Hermiston Community Center and I want to go to Walmart, it'll tell you probably a better route than you may have otherwise thought on how to get there, because it'll tell you, it knows, well, if you just walk an extra 2 minutes this direction, then you'll be able to catch the bus a lot faster than you may think, well, I'm closest to this bus stop, so I'm going to go sit there and wait for 30 minutes for the next bus to come. So I think a lot of it is continuing to encourage people to just learn about how to utilize the bus system, because I don't think this is something that's brand new to Hermiston, definitely, and it's becoming hasn't really been implemented elsewhere in Eastern Oregon either. So I think it's still a lot of getting used to for folks to be able to use this system. So we did really the lion's share of developing that. We signed the initial contract in early 2017, and then absolutely everything changed with regard to public transit funding in July of 2017. Some of you may remember that's when the large transportation package was passed by the legislature in July of 2017. It included a number of things. I think the biggest items that kind of caught the most headlines was that it phased in an increase in the statewide gas tax for roads over a number of years. It put a tax on all bicycles, and they dedicated those to go to trail funding and those types of things. And the part that I think maybe folks didn't notice, or it kind of flew a little bit more under the radar, was that implemented a statewide 0.1% payroll tax specifically to go toward public transit. So the example would be a salary of $50,000 at 1/10 means that every single person in the state of Oregon, that makes $50,000 a year is now paying $50 a year to help cover some form of public transit, whether or not they avail themselves of it. So everybody's taking home a little bit less to pay for public transit. And so what that did was I say everything changed. It extremely increased the amount of public transit funding that was available for providers. Something that is important, and I think to their credit, the legislature actually got right, was they guaranteed that 90% of all of that payroll tax has to go back to the area where it was generated from. So some of the west side of the state, they have like dedicated transit districts. So if there's a transit district, then all those funds are administered by that transit district. In the absence of something like that, like we have in Umatilla County, then it has to go to Umatilla County. So Umatilla County, with a population of 80,000 people, there's about $1.1 billion in annual payroll in Umatilla County. So at 0.1%, that's about a little over $1 million a year that comes back directly to Umatilla County to fund public transit. By contrast, when we were dealing just with the special transportation funds, just for senior and disabled, the allocation that was coming to Umatilla County was more in the neighborhood of $350,000 a year. So it more than tripled the amount of funds available for public transit in Umatilla County. So like I mentioned, it's routed through Umatilla County, but there really isn't much better way of going about this. I think the county's done a good job of managing the rollout of how they deal with allocating some of these funds to really the different areas of Umatilla County. And so it has to go through a competitive award process, whether that's communities, the actual transit providers, or who is applying for those funds. But really the most important aspect for our purposes here this evening is that that increase in payroll taxes under HB 2017 specifically says that we can't use those stiff dollars for existing services. So basically, our subsidized taxi program, we're losing $80,000 a year subsidizing that program. We can't just say, okay, great, thanks for the increased revenue, we're just going to use this to backfill what we were doing. And the purpose from the legislature was very clear, that it was intended to expand public transit services. And so that is causing a lot of confusion, I think, in the first couple of years. And so now, not the least of which being that the names of the funds are so incredibly close. There's the STF funds, which are for one purpose, and the STIF, which are for completely other service. And everybody in the state recognizes that with the cigarette taxes declining, that's not going to be a sustainable source for a lot of these programs moving forward. So the state has put in place a plan to essentially merge those two funding sources. And so we're trying to figure out what that will look like over the next couple of years. They plan to have those merged here in the next couple of years. So I think our funding scenario for all of these programs is changing, and we're just going to have to keep tabs on that. We do have joining us this evening Stacy Coons. She's been working with Eastern Oregon Business Source, working to help Umatilla County roll out and administer all of their transit things here over the past couple of years. And so I've been working with her. I hope to bring her on in a contracted role here in the next year or so to help us kind of navigate through how do we manage that shifting revenue source as we get weaned off of our STF dollars from the tobacco taxes, and how do we merge that with the STIF dollars so that we can maximize things and hopefully limit the city's long-term financial liability for things like the senior and disabled taxi program while still meeting the intent of the bill. So since we had to put those dollars into system expansions, That is where we developed the West End On-Demand Ride Cooperative, which was really just an amalgamation of a word that I tried to come up with to get across the point that this is a program specifically for getting folks to work, not necessarily like our senior and disabled taxi program, which those are vouchers that you can use to go anywhere. It seemed like because the source of the funds was from payroll taxes, it really seemed like that was really meeting the intent. It was to put this back into public transit for helping people get to work. Again, it's a voucher-based subsidized taxi program. It looks very, very, very similar to our senior and disabled taxi program. But again, in this instance, it only gets workers to and from work, either in Hermiston, Umatilla, or Stanfield. So I think one of the questions that probably would come up first is, if this was for system expansion, why wouldn't we just use that to expand our fixed route system, maybe add a Saturday service or, those types of things? Well, I think one of the things that we really find in our local economy, if we're looking at just getting people to work, is that we have quite a large number of jobs in, kind of shift work type of roles, whether that's, Walmart DCs or the Marlettes or the Lamb Westons of the world, or even things like, fast food chains and grocery stores and those types of things. Not, a large amount of our workforce doesn't just work banker hours from, 8 to 5 every single day. So that makes, and each one of these employers has completely different shift schedules for, very legitimate business reasons. And so when you really start looking at the complexity of trying to develop something that's actually going to serve some people, rather than just saying, well, this is something that's large and it can serve anybody if they want to, trying to do something like that really becomes impossible to cost efficiently design a route that will actually be used by anybody. So the way that the work program works is you have to come into City Hall and just provide proof of employment, whether that's a pay stub or something like that. We have been working with folks to, if they have an offer of employment or something like that, and they need to get to their first, a couple of weeks before they get a pay stub. We accept those types of things. And what we do to ensure that people are using it to get to and from their place of employment is that we actually print the address of their employer on a punch card. So with the senior program, people just come in and they buy single-use tickets. The way that we could most efficiently manage this program was, instead of issuing single tickets and having to write it out every single time on every single card, was we aggregated them into punch cards of 10 rides per punch card. So you'll come in, buy a punch card for 10 rides, and then whenever you ride the taxi, they just punch it out, and that's how you get around. We also, in addition to printing the addresses on the cards, we color-coded the cards to correspond to the different areas that you can use that to get to and from. So your place of employment, let's say that was here at the community center, but maybe you live outside of the city limits, then you need to be able to get to and from your home out in the city limits, but you need to get into the city. So we have several different color codes that I'll get into here in a little bit. So the most cost-effective one for the customer is the one that is really just for getting around inside of the city of Hermiston. And the reason why these prices vary is, like I mentioned, a taxi is a very labor-intensive type operation, and if they have to drive all the way from Hermiston clear out to the South Hill and Umatilla, that takes a long time for a round-trip route to get out there. And so by far the least cost of the taxi company is to deliver people around inside of the city limits of Hermiston. So we kept the cost per ride to the rider the exact same as our senior and disabled cost at $2.50. And then the next iteration is for getting around anywhere inside of the Hermiston zip code. So that is the color of punch card that you would purchase if, say, you lived out off of Diagonal, but you worked at Subway or something like that. Then you can get to and from inside of the city and out to your home outside of the city. The other one that we have is it gets you anywhere to and from the Hermiston city limits, to and from either the Umatilla zip code or the Stanfield zip code. So maybe say you live in Hermiston, but you work out at TRCI. That's the one that you'd be able to use to get to work in Umatilla. And then the highest cost one is one that allows you to basically go anywhere from any of those zip codes in the West End. Maybe say you live in Stanfield, but you work clear over in TRCI. That's the one that you'd have to use. But again, that's going to be by far the most costly to the taxi company because they have to dispatch out of Hermiston, go to Stanfield, and then drive all the way out to Umatilla and then end up back in Hermiston. So the cost allocation for paying for the work program, we were very clear in our initial grant application for SDIF dollars that the city of Hermiston taxpayers would be contributing nothing to the cost of that ride, at least to begin. I mean, we'll see how things go with increase in ridership, and maybe 30 or 40 years from now, we again get to a point where revenues are declining or something like that. But the way that it's structured is that approximately 33% of the cost of the ride is paid for by the rider, and then about 2/3 of the cost is picked up by our STIF grant. So we launched the program in October of 2019, and like with any public transit, you're not going to all of a sudden have 20,000 rides a year on a brand new program right out of the gate. So we were seeing actually for those first few months in the neighborhood of around 200 rides per month, and it was slowly starting to build as we got into 2020 and into March and April, and then all of a sudden COVID hit and nobody wants to ride public transit at all. So what we recognized was with our STIF funding, it was actually going to, it was for a 3-year allocation. We had plenty of funding available. Meanwhile, the taxi company, was having a hard time because they weren't getting people riding the taxi. So what we did was starting in July, we started a program that we felt could help us advertise and get the word out about the work program. Was that anybody who comes in as a new rider, if they come in and buy a work taxi punch card, then we'll give them 4 free punch cards, basically 40 rides, in exchange for just buying one punch card. And so we did that program through December, and we really saw a pretty significant spike in usage through October and November, December timeframe. And then obviously it dropped off like you'd expect in January, but we've really been seeing a continued rise now through March and April and May as people have worked through those free ones that they had. And I think this is a system that really relies heavily on word of mouth, people who hear about it or know somebody that uses it. I think that's how we're really getting the word out most about this opportunity. So just looking at really what that work program looks like, just for April of this spring, it's become very evident really across all of the months, but just looking at April, at about 600 rides, by far and away, the people who are using this system the most are folks who I would consider to be are getting paid right at or maybe barely above minimum wage level. Very, very few folks are actually using this program to get to places like Walmart DC, Marlette, Lamb Weston, those types of places that pay just a little bit more than that. I think that's really a function of being out here in a rural community. It's almost required of you to be able to live that you have access to a vehicle in some form or fashion. And so I think what we're seeing is that for those jobs that pay just that much more over and above minimum wage, as soon as people earn that level of wage, then they immediately obtain a vehicle or access to a vehicle pretty quickly. And so really the meat of the market that we're serving there is folks that are working, they're baggers at the grocery store, or they're folks working fast food, those types of things. So by far and away, the top destinations so far are employees at Taco Bell. They buy probably 10 of these a month, 10 punch cards, grocery outlet, Walmart, Safeway. So I think a lot of this gets to, I know we all hear a lot of stories about employers having a hard time getting employees coming back to work here coming out of the recession. And I think a lot of credit goes to the folks like Grocery Outlet and Taco Bell. I think when they're seeing folks who, they can't make it into work or something like that, I think a lot of this goes to the owners or the managers of those locations, making sure that their employees know that this type of a program is available and helping them get to work that way. And then also just in terms of destinations in April, like you would expect, again, with the cost and really just the intensity of jobs located in these various locations, about 2/3 of all the destinations are inside of the city limits of Hermiston itself, and then about another third are still inside of the Hermiston zip code. So a little bit of usage going to jobs over in Umatilla or Stanfield from Hermiston, and really I think it's just too costly, or maybe people just really didn't have the opportunity to obtain jobs if they lived in Stanfield and they wanted to work in Umatilla or vice versa. So very little usage on that part of the program. So those are really the services that either the city directly provides or we contract directly and we pay a vendor to do. But like I mentioned, there's really been fragmentation and a growth in some of these other transit options here in the community over the last couple of years. So again, I mentioned the Good Shepherd Caravan. Some things that are important, I think, to keep in mind because not all of these can be all things to all people. So the Good Shepherd Caravan, it does get people to and from medical appointments, but it's only to medical appointments with Good Shepherd or its affiliates. So we do still see a lot of folks using our senior and disabled taxi program to get to things like, dentist appointments or, other types of medical appointments that are not Good Shepherd related. Also important to keep in mind, the Good Shepherd Caravan does receive an annual allocation from the county's STF funding. Also, our senior center has a bus, and they operate it with volunteer drivers, and they go around. I know they haven't been having a lot of luncheons here lately with COVID and everything, but prior to COVID, they did have a volunteer who would go around and help folks get to the senior center for luncheons and various other activities. So that is another form of public transit, and they do also receive some STF grant funding for that service. Another one that it provides service that I would say kind of touches Hermiston and provides a little bit of in-town service is Kayak's Hermiston Hopper. That's the one that goes to and from Hermiston and out to Umatilla every day. But again, it's a relatively limited type of a service. It starts at 5 a.m. leaving Mission to get over here, then it ends at 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. But even though it's operating 13 hours a day, going all the way out from Mission to Umatilla and all the way back out to Mission every time, it really only represents 4 trips to Pendleton or 4 trips from Pendleton to Hermiston every single day. So it's really not for workers who may live in Pendleton and want to work in Hermiston, it really doesn't set up for something like a traditional 8-hour workday. It's really geared toward getting workers who live in Hermiston to get to Pendleton. And even then, it can be a bit of a challenge. And then on Saturdays, their service runs from 8:30 to 7. And then one that is in the planning stages, and this is a function of Morrow County received stiff allocation for their payroll tax, and so they chose to try to partner with Umatilla County to see how they could increase public transit, basically trying to tap the Hermiston labor market for folks to work out at employers in Boardman. I think it'll be an interesting service. I don't know that it's a huge benefit necessarily to folks in Hermiston. I think it's going to be a major benefit to employers in Boardman. This is from the report that they issued here, their consultant issued here just a couple of weeks ago. And I think what I always have to try to remind people is that if you look at the total number of jobs in Hermiston, we have almost 8,000 jobs in Hermiston compared to about 1,700 in Boardman. So I think folks see the single large employers out there in Boardman and think that there's a lot of jobs to access out there, but really just the density of all of the different types of employment is definitely in the urban area such as Hermiston. And so that's why I think it's too bad that the Hermiston Hopper really only goes one bus going from Pendleton to Hermiston back and forth. This Hermiston Boardman connector, based on Morrow County really contributing all of their stiff funding to this and getting Umatilla County to help match it, it's actually going to be operating 2 buses operating counterclockwise to each other. So it's basically going to have double the capacity for trips and getting people from Hermiston out to Boardman and here again in Umatilla. So I think there will be some increase in service for folks living in Hermiston, but I think a lot of the benefit will accrue to employers in Boardman and even folks in Boardman who want to go shop at things in Hermiston, that type of thing. And then I think this is finally, bird scooters, they technically count as public transit, and they receive no subsidy. They operate inside of the city. I know from talking, we do have Sunny Marquez. She's the operator of our taxi service in town. She's here this evening as well. I know that she really enjoys these bird scooters, actually, because it does provide another alternative for folks who may be causing problems on her taxi or something like that. And so it's been actually a pretty nice little addition to some of those public transit alternatives. So with that, I've spoken for 45 minutes, and I'm sure you're all enthralled. So I'd stand for any questions.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that exhaustive explanation.
As long as it's not exhausting.
No. Counselors, questions, comments? Ms. Davis.
Just on the work rates, you didn't say if they were single or one-way ride.
Yeah, so those were for one-way.
Okay,
Yeah, so that $2.50, for example, inside of the city, that's a one-way rate. And again, it's set up as a punch card basis, and so it's if you come in and you want to purchase a punch card, you have to actually outlay $25 to get 10 rides all at once, whereas with like the senior program where you're just buying one ride at a time, if you just need 2 tickets, you only have to bring in $5. So that is, I think, a bit of a challenge. I think that's part of the reason why it's a challenge to get really much of any utilization of the one that goes from like Umatilla to Stanfield, because those folks have to bring in $90 basically just to purchase the one punch card.
Thank you. Now that COVID is letting up a little and things are getting somewhat back to normal, how's the ridership?
Yeah, so on the Heart the Heart itself, I think we're still seeing depressed ridership numbers. A lot of that I think is a function of we have 2 different sizes of bus that we operate on that, and that's all due to the availability of bus drivers. And so I've always considered that our single largest advertising for that program is having a large bus that looks like a city bus. I think coming back from COVID and trying to find bus drivers for it, we've been operating the smaller, what looks more like a private shuttle. And so I think a lot of folks, they're still learning that that's actually a public bus. So yeah, ridership is still a little bit depressed on the Heart. On the work program and the senior program, I think like you saw, I think we're seeing some continued growth on the work taxi program side of things.
Thank you.
And I did just notice we do have J.D. Tuvey here also with Kayak Public Transit, so he can answer some of these questions also. They know more about the day-to-day details on some of these things.
Now, the work program and the senior program, they both use Umatilla Cab Company?
It's actually Hermiston Taxi is the name of the
Hermiston
company
Taxi.
now, but yeah, it was the former Umatilla Cab Company.
You mentioned that there were problems with availability for the senior program. I would assume that, I guess, is putting more people in with the work program, is that creating a bigger availability issue?
Yeah, I think part of the challenge was, and one of the reasons why we started the Heart bus was that we were hoping to try and take some of those peaking issues off of that transit system. But also I think a lot of it just had to do with management. And again, back then it was Hermiston Transit was the taxi company that was operating. And so I think there was some challenges in the market there. And so I think Sunday has done an excellent job of managing her taxi company to be able to accommodate kind of some of those peak hour demands. And so we were certainly concerned about overloading the system when we started the work program, but I think it's been a nice kind of ramp up. It's even though we may be providing 800 rides a month now, we certainly didn't start that way. And so I think Sunday's done a good job of being able to manage the rider acquisition and the vehicle acquisition to be able to accommodate that. I can certainly tell you that compared to 2015, 2016 timeframe when it was our other taxi company, I received virtually no complaints whatsoever about wait times anymore on the taxi.
Anybody else have any? Ms. Duran.
I just want to say thank you, because it seems to me like you guys are constantly looking at the system, the transportation system, and making any revisions based on the needs of our community. So thank you for doing that. I know that I have a parent that uses the taxi, uses the public transportation, and it makes life easier for her. So We see, that word of mouth seems to be the number one way to let other people know about the public transportation. So I wondered how long do you think it will be before we do have a unit, like looks like a bus, that maybe will provide more rides, I guess.
Yeah, and we do have, like I mentioned, we have JD here. I don't know. JD, do you want to, or Susan? Yeah.
Either of you two.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Susan Johnson, manager of Kayak Public Transit. And I would like to say we do currently have a 18 to 20 passenger bus that is in service. Due to the lack of a second CDL driver, we do have to interchange them off because also of the CDC guidelines of disinfecting the buses every 4 hours. The bus has to come back to the Kayak Hub in Pendleton every day. And so that's kind of caused us some difficulty with keeping that bus in service at all times. I would like to point out that just last week on that bus, we had some additional advertising put at the top of the bus, and I didn't get to send Mark a picture of that yet, but it says, serving the city of Hermiston on both sides of it. Free public transportation. We're trying to get the word out to everybody we know to let them know that it's available. We are working with drivers. We encourage people, if they get their permit, take the written test for the CDL, that we will be willing to work with them, train them, provide them a vehicle so that they can take their driving exam. They pass their exam, we will reimburse them, so there would be no cost to them. So we are reaching out and trying to do everything we can. We are working currently with a gentleman, Hispanic gentleman that is very excited, that wants to drive for Kayak, so he's working on passing his test. And so once he gets his CDL, we'll definitely be able to have the 18 passenger bus in service at all times. Any other questions? Thank you.
Well, so again, thanks everybody for your input on this. This is, obviously this is something that's very important to the public, and part of our city goals. Not being all flowery with my speeching and such. If anybody else has anything to add? All right, we'll adjourn this and restart at 7 o'clock. All right, here we go. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Hermiston City Council and Urban Renewal Agency to order with a declaration of a quorum. All members present except for the mayor, who is excused. I am the council president, be running this. Just as a reminder, everybody, when we talk, make sure your mic's on, talk into the mic. Anybody that has cell phones, please silence them. And with that, stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next up on our agenda, proclamations, presentations, and recognitions. We have a proclamation here. This is a Small Cities Month proclamation. And whereas small cities and towns under 50,000 population are home to millions of Americans and constitute the vast majority of municipalities across the United States. And whereas small cities and towns strive to strengthen their communities through the provisions of services, programs to improve the quality of life for all citizens. And whereas the state and federal government are essential partners in the success of small cities and towns and must be encouraged to continue to support programs and legislation that strengthens small communities. And whereas organizations, businesses, and citizens are partners in the success of small cities and towns and must be encouraged to continue to grow their efforts to make small communities a viable choice for people to live in. And whereas during these challenging economic times, the need for a renewed intergovernmental partnership to support essential public services is more important than ever to ensure the safety and growth of small towns America. And whereas the National League of Cities President and the Small Cities Council of the National League of Cities have declared June 2021 as Small Cities Month. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Council President Doug Primer, do hereby proclaim June 2021 as Small Cities Month and encourages President Biden, Congress, state governments, organizations, businesses, and all citizens to recognize this event and to work together this month and throughout the year to invest in small cities and towns to better the lives of all citizens. Signed this day, this 14th day of June, 2021. I'm going to sign it right now. There's that. All right, here's our first opportunity for citizens' input into non-agenda items. Anyone wishing to bring anything before the City Council that is not on the agenda is asked to please do the following. Limit the discussion to not more than 5 minutes, state your name and address, and direct your comments to me at the chair.
Hello, Jackie Linton, Hermiston. I just wanted to say that my grandsons have a lemonade stand out in front of their house. They're 8-year-old twins. And a police officer, I can't remember his name. I swore up and down I was going to remember it. I said it 5 times in my head. I still forgot. But he stopped by and made a donation. And so the reason I wanted to bring that up, I was thinking about community and relationship. And that impressed my grandsons pretty much because, they hear about things, You try not to say too many things around them, but they're so nosy. But it did make an impact on them. So I just wanted to say thank you to the police department.
Jason, that one goes to you. Tell your people thank you.
Virginia Rome Garcia, 435 East Hermiston, East Sunset Drive, Hermiston, Oregon. I'm just here to invite the community and the council members for our event on Saturday, the Juneteenth event. Looking forward to that. And so thank you for all the work you guys are doing also. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? All right, moving on to the consent agenda items. Do we have any items that we need to discuss or remove?
Council President, B is an issue. I think it's just because of the time frame of her being recommended and then appointed.
Okay, without any question, we'll move that one to items removed from the consent agenda. Any others? Are there any persons that wish to comment on consent agenda items A, C, D, E, and F? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve consent agenda items A, C, D, E, and F?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Davis, seconded by Ms. Myers. Roll call.
Yes.
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 And as a reminder, as council president, I do get to vote, unlike the mayor. Okay, so we've removed item 8B, recommend to the Recreation Projects Fund Advisory Committee, position number 2, expiring 12/31 of 2020, representing the Chamber of Commerce, Christina Olivias. Council rules state committee recommendations and confirmations must be done at separate meetings. However, the Vacancy Review Board is asking the council to consider approving a recommendation and confirmation at this meeting in order for this committee to have representation from the Chamber of Commerce. Is there any persons present who wish to comment? Okay. So I need a motion to approve recommendation and confirmation of Christina Olivas to position number 2 on the Recreation Project Fund Advisory Committee.
So moved.
I guess before we move forward, since I am still a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and this is appointing representation, I mean, I sit on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I don't think it's a personal involvement, but just for sake, I'm going to refrain from any discussion of this.
Roll call?
Yes.
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 Measure passes with, yes. You're right.
So moved. Second.
Now roll call.
Yes.
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 All right, that's 7, 4, and 1 abstention. Motion passes. Again. Okay. Public hearings. Text amendment chapters 154 and 157, HB 201, two-family dwelling code amendments. First off, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Okay, the hearing guidelines for the first 2 public hearings will now be presented by Planning Director Clint Spencer.
Okay. The following guidelines apply to 2 of the public hearings tonight. The first public hearing before the Hermiston City Council is on the proposal by the city to amend the text of the Hermiston Development Code, sections 154.19, 154.20, 157.015, 157.025, 157.026, 157.027, 157.028, 157.029, 157.042, 157.139, 157.163, 157.176, 157.179, and 157.215 relating to the provision of two-family dwellings. To testify tonight, approach the microphone and state your name and mailing address. Failure to participate or raise an issue precludes the right to file an appeal. If you have a written document that you would like the council to consider, please hand a copy to the city manager. Tonight's hearing is legislative. A legislative hearing means that the city is not approving a site-specific application. tonight's hearing is not a quasi-judicial hearing, this means that you do not have to raise any particular issue, nor is there a right to have a continuance of this hearing or to leave the written record open following the public hearing. The City Council can decide to grant either request before it closes tonight's hearing, but is not required to do so. The hearing will begin with staff presenting a report to the council. Following the staff report, persons in support of the text amendments may testify, followed by those in opposition, and ending with persons who are neutral or only have questions to ask the council. Please direct your testimony and questions to the council president. Each person may testify once and is limited to 5 minutes. If someone has testified before you and you agree with their position, you may simply say that. Following the end of public testimony, staff will recap and ask if the council has any questions for staff. Following the staff recap and council questions, the council will decide if it wants to deliberate to a decision tonight or continue the public hearing or leave the written record open for additional public testimony without another public hearing. No one has the ability to present rebuttal testimony tonight.
All right, we'll consider this hearing now open. Staff report will be presented by Planning Director Clint Spencer.
Thank you. And tonight, also via teleconference, we also have CJ Doxey from Angelo Planning Group, who will be assisting in the staff report presentation. Tonight, we're holding a hearing to consider this ordinance, which is an implementation of House Bill 2001, which requires cities to permit two-family dwellings in all zones which permit single-family development. The work we've been undergoing is funded through a grant from DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Using this grant funding, the city contracted with Angelo Planning Group to audit our development code and recommend the minimum amendments necessary to comply with House Bill 2001. There are additional provisions in the code which apply to single-family dwellings, which must also be amended to treat single and two-family dwellings equally. This is why we had such a long list of various amendments that are proposed in the ordinance tonight. In our subdivision ordinance, there are 2 changes that are proposed to our subdivision design standards, which are intended to remove our subjective design criteria. Under the statewide housing policies, any needed housing must be governed only by clear and objective development criteria, and so these amendments are intended to remove subjective terms such as compatible, which is a very hard term to define as something that's clear and objective. And in the zoning ordinance, we have much more substantive changes. The names of all of our residential zones are being proposed for amendment to eliminate our single-family classification. Since we no longer have a single-family zone, it now becomes a low-density zone, and so forth as we move through. The two-family zone becomes a medium-density zone, etc. We have proposed changes in all of our minimum lot sizes in residential zones to match our existing single-family lot size and two-family lot size together into one. Right now in the R2, R3, and R4 zones, we have one size for a single-family dwelling and another size that's slightly larger for a two-family. We're proposing to make the single-family size the controlling for both single and two-family. We're also proposing clarification that single-family and two-family development will trigger development standards for public improvements. This is when you have to pave a street in front of you, install sidewalk, etc. Right now it says that construction of a single-family dwelling is that trigger. This amends that to be single or two-family. We also want to clarify that any lot which does not meet the minimum lot size standard, right now there are some lots in the city that are 3,000, 4,000 square feet that are just legacy lots from previous times, and right now the zoning ordinance says that when you have a lot that's below the minimum lot size, it's limited to a single-family dwelling. We now have to amend to say that this is a single-family or a two-family dwelling, and then changes to our parking standards so that both a single-family dwelling and a two-family dwelling must each provide a minimum of 2 parking spaces. It's important to remember that when we're making a change like this, we are permitting two-family dwellings in all of our residential zones, but this is not a mandate to construct two-family dwellings or to prohibit single-family. It's just the legislature's intent is to make sure that the city is providing more housing options citywide. When we have accessory dwellings, there's been some confusion at our planning commission level about those as to whether if you had a two-family dwelling, could you do an ADU in the back? And the way that the accessory dwelling code is written, that's still limited only to a single-family dwelling. So if you have a two-family dwelling, that's the maximum number of dwellings you have. You can't do 3 units. It's still limited just to 2. If you have a single-family dwelling, you can do an ADU, either detached or attached. But if you have a two-family dwelling, that's your lot cap. The Planning Commission has held several work sessions on this over the last year, and also one joint session with City Council earlier this year. And the Planning Commission held a public hearing on the proposed amendments back on May 12th, 2021, and the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council adopt the ordinance 2322 as submitted. And for the record, the Planning Commission wanted to make sure that they got it into the record that they very much want to express dissatisfaction with the process taken by the state legislature in mandating these changes, and that they represent a change to local land use rules without really any local input from the city, and requests that future legislative amendments be more considerate of the local character and not intended to be one size fits all for all cities in the future. And we will be working over the next few months to try to come up with an alternate development plan, amending our planned unit development standards to help create a path that will hopefully be enticing to kind of go down our existing road with our parking standards in single family, but we'll see where that goes. But that's pretty much where we're thinking on that. At this time, I want to turn it over to CJ. He has a few slides he wants to run through, and hopefully we'll be able to not have any tech issues.
Welcome, CJ.
Pretty good.
Yes.
Yes.
there any questions of Mr. Dodson? Okay. Are there any proponents who wish to speak on this matter? Anybody for? Seeing none. Are there any neutral parties who wish to speak? Again, seeing none. Are there any opponents who wish to speak? And none. With that, this hearing is now closed. Are there any further council discussion? No? All right. I need a motion to approve the finding of facts.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Davis, second by Councilor Harden. Roll call? Wait,
Yes.
Stop. Whoop. Public comment. Okay. All right, now roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
And motion passes unanimously. All right. Next. Repealing and replacing Comprehensive Plan Appendix F and G, Policy 21, required by House Bill 203, Ordinance 2323 and 2324. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest on this? Seeing none, the hearing guidelines were previously read and apply to this hearing as well. Are there any objections to waiving the reading of the hearing guidelines? Okay, seeing none. This hearing is now open. Staff report will be presented again by Planning Director Clint Spencer.
Okay, tonight, the second hearing we're working on is for compliance with House Bill 2003. Now, in 2019, this was a legislation passed requiring cities to update certain elements of their housing policies. And so the city has been working towards implementation of this bill, which requires us to adopt updates to our comprehensive plan documents relating to the provision of housing. The legislation specifically amended ORS Chapter 197 to require cities to update our housing capacity analysis and residential buildable lands inventory, and to adopt housing policies based upon the findings of these documents. Again, the amendment process was funded through a grant from the state of Oregon, and we contracted with Angelo Planning Group and Johnson Economics for this work. The housing capacity analysis in particular requires both consideration of raw land availability and broad demographic trends in order to consider the types and prices of housing necessary to accommodate our future housing needs. The findings of this housing capacity analysis and the residential buildable lands inventory are combined into a new Policy 21 in our comprehensive plan. The findings of the buildable lands inventory and housing capacity analysis can be summarized with just a few key points. People always ask certain questions, and it's nice to have quick answers for these questions that we get all the time. So the findings state that there are 5,047 acres of unconstrained residential land in the city, of which 2,562 acres are available for future development. If you were to calculate out the theoretical maximum capacity of that land, it could accommodate about 18,000 housing units. Our projected 2040 population within our city limits and UGB is projected to be 26,045. The housing units that we would need to meet that 2040 population is 10,081 housing units. Our current inventory is 8,051. So that means that we need 2,030 additional housing units by 2040 in the city. The largest single need will be for owned single-family units at about 1,069, Second largest need will be for rented multifamily units at 523. And it's important to note that about 530 units of subsidized housing will be needed by 2040, and that's just about a quarter of all the housing that Hermiston will need over the next 20 years. Ordinance 2323 is attached to your report. This ordinance removes the existing appendices F and G from our comprehensive plan and replaces them with the new buildable lands inventory and housing capacity analysis. Those will become new appendices F and G. And then Ordinance 2324 amends the comprehensive plan with a new policy 21. That's our housing affordability and availability policy. The policy 21 is really a synthesis of our buildable lands inventory and housing capacity analysis. It represents how the city will generate our policies towards housing development and specific actions that we'll take over the next 20 years in providing available housing land, such as supporting the provision of affordable housing, working with other agencies to develop housing, encouraging flexibility in development. Those are the sort of implementing policies that we see in our appendices. At this time, I'll ask CJ to present his information as well.
Are there any questions for Mr. Doxey? Ms. Duran?
Not for you, but I do for Clint, Mr. Spencer here. In your staff report, I see that it mentions, gosh, I just lost it, that it was for actions for F through G, but, or J, excuse me. But the requested action or motion affects appendices F and G.
Okay.
Are those two different things that we're talking about?
They are two separate things.
Okay.
It's unfortunate they both start with F. We have two supplemental documents in our comprehensive plan that deal with our housing needs, and those are appendices F and G, which is our buildable lands inventory and our housing capacity analysis. And those are standalone documents in the comprehensive plan. And then in policy 21, which is in the second ordinance, our current housing policies actually stop at E. And so F through J are entirely new actions which are being added to our implementing actions. And those are the 5 that CJ has up there. The encouraging housing affordability, support for partnerships. Those are now policies F through J that are added into our overall housing policy. So we have F and G, which are documents that are in the comprehensive plan, and then A through J, which are implementing policies for housing, and F through J are new, and A through E are existing. And I'm just scrolling like crazy trying to give you the exact page that's on. It will help.
No, that's okay, Mr. Spencer. I think you've clarified.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I did have one question for you, Mr. Spencer. On the amount of available space that we're talking about, was that in accordance with having basically 2 families on one property?
It is.
So if we build a single dwelling on a lot, that takes 2 out of our inventory?
Correct.
Okay.
And then, so really the way that you come up with the 18,000 potential capacity, that is, I don't want to call it a worst case, but a very liberal way of looking at it. You know, if you have a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet for the R3 and R4 zones, that assumes every single lot will develop at 5,000 square feet. Or if it has a capacity of 22 units for a multifamily unit on an acre, every available acre would be that. You know, and in reality, we don't see that. And so when the Planning Commission was looking at that, we actually figured it would probably be more, your theoretical upper limit is probably about 15,000 units, but mathematically it's 18,000. And we do factor in the potential for duplexes and even removing existing single family and replacing them, or constructing ADUs. You factor in about a 3% increase on your existing housing stock that will go up in density over that time.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Just a comment.
Yes.
I meant to say that I want to thank the advisory committee members, which is made up of community members, that have sat through the meetings, have asked the right questions, or just questions, and for providing also input to the state. I think it's important that the state knows how, the committee kind of wrestled with some of the issues that were imposed. So I just want to give a shout out to the community members for being part of this and for providing recommendation to the city council, and also for a detailed report. Honestly, I had no idea of the dwelling information that goes into it, and I think for anyone that has any questions about that, they can read the bunch of documents that you provided. It was well put together. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, and I will pass that along to the committee as well.
Okay, with no further questions, we're at public testimony. Start with the proponents, neutral, and then opponents. First being the proponents. Do we have any proponents who wish to speak? Seeing none. Any neutral parties who wish to speak? Again, seeing none. And are there any opponents? And again, none. All right, this hearing is now closed. Any further council discussion on the matter? Okay, any public comment on the matter? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the finding of facts? Been moved by Councilor Spicer-Coons and seconded by Councilor Davis. Roll call.
Yes.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously. I don't know why I hit the hammer.
Because you can. 'Cause you
Okay. All right, next, item C. 2021-22 fiscal budget, resolutions 2182, 2183, 2184, and 2185. First off, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Hearing guidelines will now be presented by City Manager Mr. Smith.
City Council is holding a public hearing for the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. The City Council will take public testimony on this issue and make a decision at this meeting. The hearing process will begin with a staff report by City Manager Smith. Following testimony of the staff report, the City Council will take public testimony. The Council requests that all people wishing to testify approach the microphone and give their name and mailing address before testifying. People wishing to testify should limit testimony to not more than 5 minutes unless a longer period is provided by the City Council. Written testimony will be accepted from all parties. After everyone wishing to testify has had an opportunity to speak, the City Council will close the public hearing and enter deliberations. Once the public hearing is closed, no further testimony will be received. Mr. Mayor. Council President, sorry.
Yeah, don't give that one to me. Okay, with that, this hearing is now open. Staff report, Mr. Smith.
Yes, so the budget before you, unfortunately, I need to report that it is slightly different than the budget that came out of the Budget Committee. Due to the challenges of fund accounting, which requires that you make equal entries coming in and out of the fund when you transfer funds, which is slightly different than regular accounting. As we were preparing this version, the adoption budget for you to consider tonight, we recognized that some of those transfers had not been entered in the proper places in each fund. So, for example, every year we transfer funds from the TRT Fund 05 to the General Fund 03, and those numbers have to match. And so in the preparation of what was before the Budget Committee, some of those transfers did not match. Now, none of the expenses, none of the money we budgeted to spend on projects, spend on personnel, none of those numbers are different. And so after consultation with our auditors, they said that we could make those transfer changes, present, and just make sure that you were aware of them, and we would not have to go back to the Budget Committee to present them, because the essence of the budget hasn't changed. It's an accounting procedure that was not that we didn't get exactly right. So the net difference is $570,000 over the $60 million budget. So not a large percentage difference. The major portion is there was a transfer to go from the general fund to the LID fund, I believe. Yes. So the fund that we're establishing to complete the South Hermiston Industrial Park, we're basically borrowing some money from the general fund to do the project. And so we did not account for a $585,000 transfer properly when in the budget that was presented to the budget committee last month. So the budget that you had in your packet, that you have in front of you in the books, is correct from an accounting standpoint now. All of those are there. The overall budget went from $68,494,000 to $69,064,000. So there was that slight increase. Some of the transfers that were changed actually went down, so the net from that 585 is only 570. Some of the transfers were lower to make them match up. Again, I apologize for the discrepancies, but I feel like they've been they're addressed in the budget that's before you. And before I kind of talk about the 4 resolutions, I'd like to answer any questions about this particular issue.
Or just does it show an update, or is it just the same book?
No, this is a new book. It's got all the new correct numbers in it. And it has, we do the budget 3 times essentially. We have the proposed, we have the adopted, and then proposed. What's the other middle one? Approved by the budget committee, and then adopted once the council has given it final approval. So the numbers that are there are the correct numbers based on the approved, and this book is all updated numbers. Councilor Myers?
So the 585 transfer then, that's the sum total of the difference?
Well, the sum total is actually 570 because there were a couple of other small transfers that the numbers were not accurate. I could go through all of them if you'd like, but it's a net of 570.
Okay. And then this book is correct?
That book is
Okay.
correct,
All right.
yes.
I have a question.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, being a new person that is going through the budget process with the rest of the city council members, how often do these type of transfers, revisions, or?
It is not typical that we would have a problem like this. This was somewhat the cause of utilizing a new software system this year that these discrepancies were found. We haven't had them in the past. I don't anticipate having them in the future.
Any other questions about this matter?
I guess, other than the transfer to the lid, can you outline what the other issues were?
So in the street fund, there was a $10,000 difference in the cash forward number that was moved from the 04 fund to the 08 savings account for building an additional shed at the street department. There was a, let's see, that's that one. There was a $25,000 difference between miscellaneous special revenue fund transfer that was between there and the general fund. Then, those are that one. Then the 585, and so those The 25,000 is the one that should have been lower rather than higher, so that's the one that gives us a net decrease from the 585 to 570. But those were the three funds that had changes.
And all the money was allocated, it was not placed in the proper location?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other, yes, Councilor Brown.
Byron, when did you notice a mistake?
We found it probably about a week after the Budget Committee meeting,
Okay.
as we were putting this final book together.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question then. The budget process, and again, new guy question, you'll have to pardon me, because we have the proposed budget, and then we all get together, and so we have, members of the community that are, in the room at that time. And I'm just thinking, all right, if one of them were to ask me, why I'm making the decision that I'm making tonight, and I want to have a good answer for that. And so when it comes to the funds were already allocated, right? And so does this in any way say that the city is spending more than it normally is? I mean, because people want to come down to like, all right, what does it look like? It's, brass tacks.
Right. And so again, this is mostly born out of the challenge that we have with fund accounting, which requires anytime we take money from one fund to the other, we have to make 4 entries to keep track of it. And so those entries were just missed on these 3 transfers. And so the money that we talked about, how much we're spending, all of that is the same. I think I even mentioned that $585,000 transfer to the Local Improvement District Fund and everything. It was just the way we had accounted for it was not proper in that budget that was presented, in the document that was presented. I think the concept was, I think I explained it the way it should be, but it was not on the paper. So to answer is, we just made a mistake. I don't know how to answer it any different.
All right. Continue on then.
All right. So as our process for adopting the budget, we adopt 4 resolutions. And these will all be before you in a few minutes. But 2182 is a resolution that we're required, if we're going to receive state revenues, we have to adopt a resolution that says we want to receive state revenues. I'm really not sure why we do this, but we do. So then the next one, 2183, is the one that actually lays out the appropriations, and it does it in a high level. It doesn't go into all the detail that you have in your book. Basically, just making sure we show what we're appropriating in the different funds, and then that's the one related to imposing our property tax. 2184 is basically establishing our savings accounts. It's what we call our reserve funds. Those are all established, and the amounts are in the resolution. And then the final one is 2185, and that establishes the compensation plan for the employees. So it lays out all the job descriptions, what pay classification they're all in, and then it sets out the pay plan. And this time it has 2 pay plans, what the pay would be on July 1st and then on January 1st, because as I explained, we'll implement the raise in 2 phases rather than 1 like we would normally. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilors, any questions? Okay. With that, we're going to move to public testimony. Again, in order, proponents, neutral, and opponents. Beginning with proponents, anybody wishing to speak? Seeing none. Any neutral parties? Again, none. And opponents to this? Seeing none. This hearing is closed. Any further council discussion at this point? Okay, seeing none. I need a motion to approve the staff report.
So moved.
Oh. Still need a second.
Second.
Okay, I think Ms. Peterson got the motion to approve and Ms. Davis is second, or was it Barone? Okay, we'll go with Mr. Councilor Barone. Okay, roll call, or whoop, public comment, sorry. Isn't that covered though in the proponents and opponents?
Yeah, I think under a public hearing, we probably don't need to have
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of, that's what I
final.
thought it was, but okay.
Yes.
We'll do it anyway. Anybody from the public wishing to comment? All right. Roll call.
Yes.
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 All right. Motion passes unanimously. And now we're to ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance number 2322, text amendment chapters 154 and 157 relating to House Bill 2001, two-family dwelling code amendments. Please view the public hearings. Okay. City Manager Smith.
Yes, so as we went over, I think, in good detail in the public hearing, this is the first ordinance to implement those changes to the zoning code. And we'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay. Any persons present who wish to comment? Seeing none. Council President requests first reading of the ordinance be read by title only and calls for a roll call. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Passes. Mr. Luisi?
The first reading of ordinance number 2322 by only reading the title. An ordinance amending section 154.19, 154.20, and 154.65 of chapter 154 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances, and amending sections 157.015, 157.025, 157.026, 157.027, 157.028, 157.029, 157.042, 157.139, 157.163, 157.176, 157.179, and 157.215 of Chapter 157 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances relating to provisions of two-family dwellings. Mr. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Luisi. Okay, Council President requests that the ordinance be put up for final adoption at this meeting and that the second reading be by title only. Calls for a roll call.
Yes.
No, no motion needed.
Okay. Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Passes unanimously. Mr. Luisi?
The second and final reading of ordinance number 2322 by only reading the title. An ordinance amending section 154.19, 154.20, and 154.65 of chapter 154 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances, and amending sections 157.015, 157.025, 157.026, 157.027, 157.028, 157.029, 157.042, 157.139, 157.163, 157.176, 157.179, and 157.215 of Chapter 157 of the Hermiston Code of Ordinances relating to provisions of two-family dwellings. Mr. Council President.
Thank you, sir. Can I get a motion, or I need a motion to ordinance, a motion that ordinance 2322 be adopted and become effective 30 days after adoption by the City Council?
So moved.
Second.
Let's see. Motion by Ms. Davis, seconded by Mr. Harden. Any public comment? All right. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Ordinance 2323, repealing and replacing Appendix F and G of the Comprehensive Plan. City Manager Smith.
Yes, as the previous ordinance, if there's any questions, we'd be happy to address those if they came up after the public hearing.
All right. Any persons present who wish to comment on Ordinance 2323? Seeing none. Council President requests first reading of the ordinance be read by title only and calls for a roll call. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Motion passes, or roll call passes. Mr. Luisi.
The first reading of ordinance number 2323 by only reading the title, an ordinance repealing and replacing Appendix F and G of the Hermiston Comprehensive Plan relating to residential needs and buildable lands. Mr. Council President.
Okay. Council President requests that the ordinance be put up for final adoption at this meeting and that the second reading be by title only and calls for a roll call.
Yes.
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 Passing. Mr. Luisi.
The second and final reading of ordinance number 2323 by only reading the title, an ordinance repealing and replacing Appendix F and G of the Hermiston Comprehensive Plan relating to residential needs and buildable lands. Mr. Council President.
Thank you, sir. Need a motion that ordinance 2323 be adopted and become effective 30 days after adoption by the City Council.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Spicer-Coon and seconded by Ms. Davis. Roll call.
Yes.
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 And motion passes. Ordinance 2324, repealing and replacing Comprehensive Plan 21, Housing Needs. Mr. Smith.
Again, we'd be happy to answer any questions and request approval of this ordinance.
Any persons present who wish to make any comments? Council President requests first reading of ordinance be read by title only and calls for a roll call.
Yes.
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 Mr. Luisi.
The first reading of ordinance number 2324 by only reading the title, an ordinance repealing and replacing Policy 21 of the Hermiston Comprehensive Plan to comply with statewide requirements relating to updating housing needs. Mr. Council President.
Thank you. Council President requests that the ordinance be put up for final adoption at this meeting and the second reading be by title only and calls for a roll call.
Yes.
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 Mr. Luisi.
The second and final reading of ordinance number 2324 by only reading the title, an ordinance repealing and replacing Policy 21 of the Hermiston Comprehensive Plan to comply with statewide requirements relating to updating housing needs. Mr. Council President.
Motion that ordinance number 2324 be adopted and become effective 30 days after adoption by the City Council. Motion.
Second.
Need a motion?
Oh, is it? So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by
That was just a mumble from that
Ms.
end.
Myers, second by Mr. Barone. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Getting a little punchy by now, aren't we?
Numbers.
Doing okay over there, Mr. Luisi? A lot of reading today. I don't think you're done yet, are you? Okay, we're now at Resolution 2181, Riverfront Park Construction Contract Award. City Manager Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Riverfront Park experienced 2 floods in the last 2 years, 2019, 2020. Both of them caused a lot of damage there. 2020 caused an even greater amount of damage, particularly to the parking lot and the playground area. And as we, that was 2 years in a row working with FEMA on the same area. We worked with them and suggested maybe we could relocate the parking lot and the playground and hopefully alleviate the amount of damage that would happen. It's always going to flood that park. It was designed to do that. We knew it would do that. But we can move it out of where the main flow of the river goes and hopefully not be lifting up large pieces of asphalt and carrying them an amazing amount of distance. It was really kind of scary, the power that was shown there. So as part of that, we went out to bid to basically they'll prepare the site for the new playground, the location, and then also prepare the new parking lot and then pave it. We received 3 bids. The low bidder is Granite Construction for $154,140. Anderson, Perry & Associates, our engineers, have reviewed the bids, and they recommend awarding this contract to Granite Construction as the apparent low bidder. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
FEMA's reimbursing us
Yeah,
75% of the.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Okay, are there any persons present who wish to comment on this? Seeing none, I'll need a motion to adopt Resolution 2181 and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Davis and second by Mr. Spicer-Coon. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Resolution 2182, 2183, 2184, and 2185 related to the adoption of fiscal year 2021 and 2022 budget for the city of Hermiston. City Manager Smith.
Yes, as I explained, the 4 different resolutions, and any other questions, be happy to answer those about the related to the budget.
All right, are there any persons present who wish to comment on resolutions 2182, 2183, 2184, or 2185? We'll get there. Okay, yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say that I appreciate the many layers of transparency that are built into this process, and in that way, because, we do get asked questions and everything, and so all the millions of times we say the same ordinances and that kind of thing, the whole reason behind it is so that everything is incredibly transparent. And so thank you very much for going back and double checking everything and then coming to us and saying, hey, here's where we need to fix this part. And I really appreciate that because it shows the people that we work for that we are open and that we're doing our jobs. So thank you so much for that. And all of the bazillion pieces of paperwork that you guys do every day. Thank you. We know it's a ton of work and we really appreciate it. And the fact that it's on our website and it's in the paper and all that other stuff. it makes it so that way the community can really see what's going on. And so, anyway, that's just my thanks for doing all of that, because it's not easy stuff.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Outstanding. Yes, Councilor Brown.
Yes, and again, this is more for like the public and new counselors. This is probably the single most important document that we approve as counselors up here. The budget essentially states what the priorities of an organization is, and for us as a city, we've outlined our priorities for this year. We have a lot going on, and hope to see it come to fruition, and the community also enjoy it. And much like Councilor Peterson said, the transparency, it's immense. We want everybody to know exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we're making best use of people's resources. So I look forward to approving this document, and big thanks to the city. You guys put in the work every single day to make this happen, and so I look forward to seeing how the next year is going to be.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. I need a motion to adopt Resolution 2182 declaring the City of Hermiston's election to receive state revenue and lay upon the record.
So, second.
Okay. All right, I got Ms. Duran as motion to approve and Councilor Barone as second. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Motion adopting Resolution 2183, adopting the City of Hermiston's budget, make appropriations, impose and categorize taxes for fiscal year 2021-22, and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Spicer Kuhn, seconded by Councilor Harden. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. You have your money now, sir. Motion adopting Resolution 2184, establish reserve funds for the City of Hermiston fiscal year 2021 and 22, and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
The in stereo. Okay, I believe motion by Ms. Davis and second by Mr. Spicer Kuhn.
It's all good.
Call the tie. Okay, roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. And motion adopting Resolution 2185, adopting the compensation plan for the City of Hermiston employees fiscal year 2021 and 22, effective July 1, 2021, and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Duran, seconded by Mr. Harden. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. Resolution 2186, adopting state building codes. City Manager Smith.
Yeah, so this is somewhat of a formality. The state, by state law, requires us to use a certain building code, and we don't have an option. In other states, you do have that option, but here we don't. But they also require that we adopt those changes. So that's what is before you tonight, is to adopt the current codes for residential, structural, electrical, and plumbing in order to stay current with the state requirements. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. You'll also note our building officials here if you want to talk about how big the 2x4 needs to be, he can tell us.
If you can afford it.
Yeah, we can't afford any 2x4s, but
We'll find them. Okay, any persons present who wish to comment? Councilors? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 2186 and lay upon the record?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Davis, seconded by Counselor Harden. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Passes unanimously. Page 4 done. Okay, Resolution 2187, updating the master fee schedule for the building department and library. City Manager Smith.
So mostly this resolution is to deal with the same issue that was on the last one. That's the building codes. With the new codes, they also updated their fee structures that we utilize a software program provided by the state that requires us to also use the same fee structure so that then it's the same all around the state. It would, depending on the fee, it goes up anywhere between 17 and 33%. And some of these actually have not been updated for many, many years, up to 20 years, some of them. So this is a necessary change. The one change, the library board has approved or recommended the public rental of the meeting room that's downstairs in the library. And so that this is just to approve a deposit, a refundable deposit for anybody who might want to utilize that for a private event.
I have a question on that, Council
Okay,
President.
go ahead.
So, but in the finding, I don't know if I'm reading this right because I'm blurry. But down over here it says, I think it says something about library. Do not approve library board recommended refundable deposit. There's a sentence there right above the recommendation.
That must have been a typo in the report.
Because it's, yeah, one document saying yes, there's a refundable deposit, one saying there isn't, so.
Yes, it would be for, we are asking you to approve a refundable deposit.
All right. I don't know if it's very clear on the fee.
It's
schedule
clear
either.
on the fee part, it's not clear on the recommendation part. That's
Okay, all right. Well, it's been a long meeting.
Has been a bit.
So we need to make those changes and then adopt it?
I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty sure,
It was an
Yeah.
alternative recommendation.
yeah. Yeah, in the actual fee schedule, it is to approve a refundable deposit of $100. Yeah, on the recommendation, that's right.
Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay, I need a motion to adopt Resolution 2187 and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
Barone, you got the first one? Okay, Counselor Barone on first and Counselor Spicer-Coon on second. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. And our final resolution for tonight, it looks like, on this one. Resolution 2188, Airport Minimum Standards. Counselor Smith, or City Manager Smith.
I don't want that promotion. Mr. Morgan, would you?
Yes, I remember City Council adopted a new set of airport minimum standards here about a year and a half ago. Since that time, several members of the Airport Advisory Committee requested to add a little bit more detail specific to keeping the ag spray operator areas a little bit cleaner and specifying some more minimum standards for those aerial applicators. And so those changes were worked over with the Airport Advisory Committee over several meetings earlier this year, and they're recommending that you make those changes to add a few more requirements for cleanliness and upkeep and those types of things for the aerial applicators.
Any other question, or any questions of Mr. Morgan? Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll need a motion to adopt Resolution 2188 and lay upon the record.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Harden, seconded by Councilor Duran. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes. All right, temporary children's recreation fee reduction. City Manager Smith.
Yes, so in May, the Parks and Recreation staff applied for a grant from the Oregon Community Foundation K-12 Summer Learning Fund. And this application was based on reducing fees that we would charge for our youth programs during the summer in particular. Now, our application highlighted the things that we do particularly related to the swimming pool, so swimming lessons and other programs there, but it would apply to any summer programs, so any of the camps. We found out early this month that we were awarded $200,000 that we could use to reduce the fees for youth programs during the summer, and the grant is also clear that if we don't use up the $200,000 in the summer, we can use it through the end of the year on any programs for youth. So we were requesting that we're able to temporarily alter our Parks and Rec fee schedule to reduce those fees by 50%. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That is outstanding.
Yeah.
That is
Wonderful.
of all the things that are on here. this is
Brandon
one-
back here was the author of the grant, so appreciate him.
Good job, Brandon.
Yes. So is this just going to be across the board 50% reduction on all fees?
Yes.
Other questions, comments?
Question about, is there, I guess for, obviously this is going to help a lot of kids being able to enroll because of prices, but is there any like grant that's already existing for kids that have that high of need for free or anything?
Yeah, we
like
do
that?
already have scholarship programs.
Okay,
They can
perfect.
apply for those as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And regarding the scholarship programs, do you know like how the word goes out, like as just as like how they are being marketed to any the different populations that might?
Yeah, I know we include information about it in all of our brochures, and there's also information on the website that we utilize for registration.
And is that in English and Spanish?
Yes.
Any others? Councilors?
I just want to, again, thank Brendan for applying for this grant, and I think it's going to make a huge impact with our youth, since many of them may not have had the opportunity to participate in some of the camps and all the different activities that the city has to offer. So I'm very grateful to you and the work that your department is doing on behalf of the youth. So thank you so much for that.
I'd like to say the same thing. You guys did a really wonderful thing here. This is actually one of the most exciting things I've seen on here in a long time. And it really makes me feel good that we were able to accomplish something like this. You guys made this happen, and that is beyond outstanding. I am blown away. Nice job. Any other persons wishing to make comment on this? Seeing none. Can I get a motion to temporarily reduce youth recreation fees up to 50% until the $200,000 grant has been exhausted?
So moved.
Everybody moved and everybody seconded. All right. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
I am happy to say motion passes unanimously. All right, committee reports, city committees, liaisons. Anybody wanting to bring a report forward? Ms. Meyer.
We had a Parks and Rec meeting last Thursday for the first time in a year, I believe, an official meeting. We went on a tour of Funland given by, Brandon, sorry. Currently, right now, they should be working on the resurfacing, and that should be finished on Wednesday. Play features are in, except for those that we have here. The concrete benches and the concrete and the benches are being worked on now. We just accepted the approval of the $200,000 for the reduction of fees. Swim lesson registration started on June 10th, and over 12,000 transactions, and many slots are already full. Partnering with the Hermiston School District and Echo School District with their summer programs to offer swim lessons focuses on high-risk kids with limited access to the pool. Partnered with Made to Thrive to get their high-risk families into swim lesson spots that can work for them. We still need additional instructors to create more classes. Summer camps and programs begin June 21st. Funland dedication, July 4th. 4th of July celebration. There will be vendors, games, at Funland will be opening, and fireworks at 10 o'clock. There is no pool party this year due to COVID complications. The pool will be open normal hours, and that is 1:10 through 6:45 on the 4th. July 10th is inflatable fun run at Butte Park. Info is on the website. The pool officially opens for the regular season on June 19th. And that was our meeting.
Excellent. Next.
A lot of info, yes.
Yes. Outstanding.
And we played on some of the toys and also jumped up and down on the rubberized surface, so it was pretty cool.
Which one is your favorite toy?
Well, most of them, you could look at them, but you couldn't really get on them because they weren't bolted down. So that was a problem. And I didn't want to go on the slide.
Okay, so Parks and Rec. Next, any other committees? None? Okay.
We had a EOTech meeting, but unfortunately, I was at my brother's graduation, so I think Mr. Smith will be able to comment on it once we get to city manager comments.
Now or then?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, we had a great discussion with the advisory committee after your approval of the site plan, the master plan. We started talking about priorities for what to start working on there. So we went back, referred to the strategic plan, and also some of the projects that have been requested by both the fair and the rodeo, and kind of came up with three projects that we'll be working on. First, continuing to secure permanent irrigation water for EOTech, as that was kind of the highest priority. And then the next one was to start back on the design for a event-related RV park. So not one that we might rent out to the public, but specific for people coming there for events. So it'll be different than some of the things we talked about in the past.
A short-term style as opposed to a long-term style.
Right, correct. It wouldn't be, we wouldn't have people living there year-round. And those were the main two items that they recommended that we start pursuing. So started working on those just last week again. So.
Okay. Any others? Councilor Harden.
Well, this is Byron's night, city manager's night. There's a faith-based advisory committee meeting on the 1st of June. And city manager Byron Smith presented the utility assistance fund and was getting the churches involved with being a part of that utility assistance fund. So you want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, as we talked about when we talked about the priorities for our ARPA funds that are coming to the city, trying to find some way to help people who might be struggling with the utility bills. I've seen this model work in other cities, so I approached the Faith-Based Advisory Committee about the city making a kind of a large deposit potentially into an account, and then asking the churches to match that, and then also talking about the city making an ongoing contribution and kind of changing our policy right now that we use for those requesting a reduction in their utility bills, and doing that in partnership with Capco, who kind of already has an in with those who are in need, and they can offer that when it's appropriate, and they can set it up very well. They did a great job with some of the CARES Act funds that we did. So anyway, the Faith-Based Advisory Committee was very receptive. They were going to take some of just kind of the outline of this idea to a broader group of the churches and see if they were interested, and then their plan is to come back at their next meeting. I think, is it August? Yeah. So in August, and then we would, and I've already been communicating with them on some details. So I think potentially in August we'll be coming back with a recommendation of how we'd like to structure that and some of the things that how they would like to partner with us. So it was very very positive discussion.
Also, one note, that it was stated that National Law Enforcement Week, they handed out 4,350 ribbons and magnets for National Law Enforcement Week this year. It's a record that since they've started it about 7 years ago. So also, this group also works on a school adoption, that churches adopt to schools and provide things for the staff and encouragement and sometimes cleanup, whatever. So that's one of the things that's happening. So anyhow, and they've got their big festival for the Greater Hermiston. It's called Greater Hermiston City Fest. It's happening on August the 28th of this coming year. So try to put it somewhere in between fair and roundup. Okay. So.
Excellent. Sounds like a plan.
Anyhow, I wasn't at the meeting. I'm sorry I was not able to make it, but I appreciate Lily getting out the minutes so I could report on it. So anyhow.
I know this isn't said enough, but good job, Lily.
Good job, Lily.
Any other committee reports? All right, well, my turn, I guess. Couple things on coming up. Looks like we've got a statewide conference for city leaders on June 17th at 10:05. If you get the newsletter from the League of Oregon Cities, that should be in your email somewhere. There's a dial-in code for that.
Yeah, it's normally on Friday, but this time it's on Thursday because of the meeting that the board of directors have. So that's why it's a different date of the week.
So next is there was a deal put out by Mr. Wattenberger regarding GREAT. Mark or Dan, do you want to talk about that at all? Or is this too early for that?
Or the news release sent out today?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do have our South Hermiston Industrial Park groundbreaking that we have going up here on July 7th. So make sure that you keep that on your calendars. That's for the South Hermiston Industrial Park. But then on the GREAT project, that's the Getman Road Alternative Transportation Enhancement Project. That is a project that we're really hoping to prioritize some of our American Recovery Plan Act dollars to leverage against some other potential additional funding coming down the pike. So we've been working with our lobbyists at Merchant McIntyre to try and continue pushing that project to see if we can't get some federal and state funds to match against our ARPA dollars. So we did put out something about that project in news release form, largely hopefully just so that when the congressional staffers search this project, something actually pops up about it and so they can see what the project is. So I'd encourage all of you to check your inbox there and look at that news release to familiarize yourself a little bit more with that project, and so you can go out and answer more questions once people start asking you about it.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And then finally, for me, I had the unfortunate honor of attending the funeral on Sunday for Deputy Jason Post. He was lost tragically in a rafting accident in Wallowa County. We brought him home on Sunday, and we put him to rest on Sunday as well. So my thoughts, and I hope everyone's thoughts are for the family in this really trying time, because it was a horrible thing. Many people from all over, almost every law enforcement agency in the region was there. I know Chief Hermiston sent a contingent there, and the outpouring of support was tremendous. The line of patrol cars was well over a mile long, and it was a sight to see, if nothing else. So that's what I have. Councilors. Councilor Drum.
So we also received an email from Ms. Inners. Ways that we can support Detective Studebaker. So if you haven't had the opportunity, they are providing some bracelets and stickers. And I do want to say that I do miss his posts, and I hope and pray that he continues to get better. But here's, I guess, one way that we as the City Council can also help him in a time of need, and as well as our community members, where we can make donations if we want to. They set up a Venmo account. You just have to simply use a QR code or send the money to @Team Studebaker, or you can also go to Banner Bank and use Mr. Studebaker's name, and they have a fund set up for him there. The other thing that I want to mention is, since we have Jade here, I want to give a shout out to Jade. Jade reported on a tweet that she will be leaving the area to move on to Utah, I believe. So her last day in Hermiston will be at the end of the month, and she will be moving on to work closely with her brother. So it's a great opportunity, but I feel it's a loss for our area. You've covered a lot of the City Council meetings, as well as the school district when I had the opportunity to work as their communications officer. So I want to thank you for the work that you've done, for the way that you kept our community members informed of not just local, but other legislature issues, that could have affected our area. So thank you so much for the work that you've done, Jade, and we wish you the best.
Thank you, Jade. I hope your endeavors in the future are as bright and shining as you've been for us.
Good luck.
All right.
I've got two other things. First of all, Jason, I wanted to thank you also. I was looking at the corner of Highland and First Street, which I know a lot of people have talked about being very crowded, especially when students are leaving for lunch. I've seen an officer at that corner, I think kind of really prioritizing the education standpoint for our students, educating them about the walkway, how to walk on it, what's the safe way to do it. And so noticing their presence there. I've also noticed the students are also more in packs. I've noticed that drivers are a little bit more happy, and looks like students are being educated at the same time. So thank you so much to your department for continuing to educate our students that they have safe practices. So I really appreciate that. And Jade, go get them.
Any others? Mr. Smith?
Yes, just a few items I'd like to, and Mr. Morgan already highlighted the July 7th for the ship groundbreaking, so please make sure that's on your calendar, 12:15. Also, just as a warning or a heads up, 395, there'll be a large overlay project that similar to what we had go through the city, but it'll start at 4th through Stanfield. We hope we'll be getting more communication. We expressed some concern to the ODOT staff, and hopefully we'll be getting more information so we can have the details. But we did approve them to work through the night, so that will be causing some additional noise in the community. But we feel like that'll be better from a traffic impact standpoint. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. But we, again, don't know. They have started concrete work down in Stanfield, but I don't know when they're going to be here in Hermiston particularly. So as soon as we get more details, we'll pass them on. Then I will be out of the office this Friday for a League of Cities board meeting. It'll be the first time we're meeting in person since COVID started, so it'll be good. Good to see people in person again. And you know, I think one of our big topics is going to be as we wrap up the legislative session, things like that. Some things that are coming. So also, just I appreciate all the work you did tonight. This was a lot of items on the agenda. I appreciate that. It was some of these things just seemed to just all come together. I couldn't separate them, so thank you very much. And I know it's not always fun, but appreciate it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Especially for a council president, right? Instead of the mayor.
Yeah, I got a lot of signing to do by the time the night's out. Okay, any others? All right, so at this time we're going to call or adjourn the city council meeting and convene the Urban Renewal Agency meeting. Call to order. New business. As if we didn't have enough already, we got a public hearing.
Yes.
Public hearing for the Hermiston Urban Renewal Agency 2021 fiscal budget, Resolution 13. First off, are there any conflict of interest? Seeing none, hearing guidelines will now be presented by Mr. Smith.
So the Urban Renewal Agency Board will take public testimony on the issue of the FY 2021-22 fiscal budget and make a decision tonight at this meeting. The hearing process will begin with a staff report by Planning Director Clint Spencer. Following presentation of the staff report, the Urban Renewal Agency Board will take public testimony. The board requests that all people wishing to testify approach the microphone, give their name and mailing address before testifying. People wishing to testify should limit testimony to not more than 5 minutes unless a longer period is provided by the Urban Renewal Agency Board. Written testimony will be accepted from all parties. After everyone wishing to testify has an opportunity to speak, the board will close the public hearing and enter deliberations. Once the public hearing is closed, no further testimony will be received.
Okay, so the hearing is now open. And staff report.
Here. So the Urban Renewal Agency for 21-22 has a proposed budget of $406,918. This is based on anticipated tax revenue of $240,242, combined with $166,000 of unexpended revenues from previous year. There are several line items. There is $50,000 in the budget for facade grants available for businesses in the district to improve their exteriors. There is $48,500 for the wayfinding sign project, which will focus on downtown parking, and $107,000 is anticipated for debt relief on the Festival Street bond. So that leaves $171,000 that's unexpended contingency in the budget, which will either be used to seed at the Jumpstart Loan Fund for the next fiscal year, or we'll considering a couple of maybe potential other improvement projects that we'll do through a supplement.
Okay. All right, public testimony. Are there any persons who wish to comment? We'll start with the proponents, then go to neutral, and then opponents. So do we have any proponents who wish to speak? Seeing none. Any neutral parties? Seeing none. Any opponents wish to speak? And none. With that, then the hearing is closed. Is there any further council discussion? Anybody?
Were there any additions or changes to this budget?
No, there were no changes.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve the staff report?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Ms. Davis, seconded by Mr. Barone. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Motion passes. All right, let's see. Resolution 13, adopt the 2021-22 Hermiston Urban Renewal Agency budget, make appropriations, declares the agency's election to request the maximum amount of revenues that may be raised by the Hermiston Urban Renewal Agency. Mr. Smith.
Yes, we're happy to answer any questions.
Any question? Okay, any persons present who wish to comment from the public? Seeing none. Can I get a motion to adopt Resolution 13 and lay upon the record?
So moved.
Second.
And moved by Mr. Barone, seconded by Mr. Spicer-Coon. And any persons, we've had comments. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Any unscheduled communications? Seeing none. Anybody got anything for the good order?
Resolution 13. Is that the one we just
Are we good? Okay. Let's adjourn.
There's so many.
There, yeah.